Yep.
Is that yours?
You got an update?
You better cancel. No, that would not be
Now's not the
good.
time.
That would be bad.
It's gonna force you, Deb. Watch, it'll just die in 5 minutes. Sweet.
You didn't take the update.
Right?
Oh boy. Oh boy.
Just hide.
Just leave it there. For days we have to. That's
We're live, man.
at least through the night, right? It is 6:30, so I'll call this special meeting of the Sturgis Common Council to order. September 21st, 2023. First item's approval of the agenda. Is there a motion?
So moved.
The first by Becca,
Second.
second by Tony. Any discussion? All those in favor of the agenda, please indicate by stating yes.
Yes.
Opposed to no. We've got an agenda. Please stand, remove cover, and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Item 4 is reports. There's only one item below it at 4.1. It's the 2024 budget first reading. Faye, I'll turn it over to you to start. Give us a staff report, please.
Thank you, Mayor. So on last Tuesday, Adam and I and Lisa sat down and started kind of doing what we had told you guys that we were going to do to cut the budget, the $412,427. First thing we did is we went through to those 4 positions that we have not hired and went with the 4 months. So that was from fleet, engineering, finance, and then wastewater. So after we did that, we could see that we were probably going to need a little bit more, and so we went into my wages. That will be for just a part of the year last year, and it was at 5.5 months. We went back to 4.5 months. I am planning on staying on not staying on, but putting in a few hours to help with the annual report and the audit. And so we backed that off, and so doing that, we were able to reduce what was going to have to be taken out of each department. We went from 34,000 down to 17,000. So after we did that, we did the HR risk fund of 30,000. If Lisa wants to just kind of explain that a little bit.
Yeah, so what that is the city for, about 10 years now, maybe 8, has done a deductible buy down on our health insurance plan. So basically the city purchases a higher deductible health plan and then buys down that deductible so that while we're all saving money on the premiums for that, the employees are still experiencing a lower deductible plan. So basically we're self-funding that difference between what the employee is paying and what the deductible or the health plan will pay. And so because we're self-funding that, we do budget for that payment that we would have to make if an employee were to hit that internal deductible. And so what we have traditionally budgeted that as at $1,800 an employee. The full risk would be $2,000, but not every employee is going to hit their internal deductible, and not every employee is going to hit that secondary deductible. So we basically buy that down. We budget for it, so it's $1,800. We're taking a little bit more proactive approach to that, and we're budgeting it at $1,300. And trying to find some savings there. Not every employee is going to hit that $2,000 internal deductible. So we're hoping that we have a healthy year and that employees will not need the delta that we're getting rid of.
And then the next change that we did, we had talked about a transfer from wastewater for $62,000, but because of the change of the wages and how that was taken care of, and the HRA, we ended up only taking $34,632 out of wastewater. We did the $150,000 transfer out of equipment replacement into general fund. The attorney's health, we ended up that was not available. That had already been taken care of. There was no health insurance there. We also did the city manager, we did a reduction on the wages for the new city manager of $15,000. And then also the in cash in hand, I did increase that by $5,500. So you have in front of you on all of the departments the summary showing what was taken out of each department. The ones that say wages is beside it is what like I had explained: finance, the city manager, engineering, fleet, and then the police. And then police was just the HRA was what affected them with the 10,000. So do you have any questions on that? I think I've covered pretty much all of it. Basically on my sheet here, we dropped general fund to 178,000, or we dropped general fund by 178,412. The overall budget was dropped by $210,002. And that will allow us then to do the $2,944,853 is what we can request. And then just wanted to let everyone know that we're doing good. I know there's rumors out there that we're broke and we're going under and all that stuff. We are fine. We have cash on hand. We do have cash coming in. Of course, we still have expenses going out, but there is nothing that we need to panic about, which is out there. But we are fine.
If I might observe this with council's permission, there is a Sturgis that is in bankruptcy, but it's not Sturgis, South Dakota. What state is that
Kentucky.
in? Kentucky. So the rumors of our financial demise are greatly exaggerated.
And then Lisa has a little information that she would like to share with you.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I know that several of you received several questions regarding the benefits and compensation related to the 2024 budget. I'm going to read those questions and hopefully try and answer them to your satisfaction. If you have any questions as we go forward, please let me know or interrupt me, and Faye will also do the same as I answer some questions related to her. First, I do want to preface it that you guys all know that governmental wages and salaries can't compare to the private sector, so we are always looking for unique ways to attract and retain and reward our existing employees. The first question is, the city employees are on the South Dakota retirement system, some at 8% and some at 6%. The difference between that is that law enforcement and EMS starting in July are, are on that 8% match. Basically, they are a Class B employee with the South Dakota retirement system, and they have that higher match. The employee puts in 8% and the city matches 8%. The reason that's higher is those employees do retire at an earlier age. They're eligible for that retirement at about 10 years earlier than the Class A employees. The Class A employees are other full-time employees. They are the ones that match at 6%, and then the city matches those wages into that. That is the South Dakota retirement system. We are required by law to fund that, and we do participate in that. So there's no cutting that and holding it to save it for later. The South Dakota retirement system is very conservative in that regard and takes full responsibility for the obligations that it has for those employees. The second part of their question was, when did the city government decide to supplement retirement plan with a $1,000 match? Back in, a while ago. Yeah, 2000.
Lisa, could you speak a little slower, please?
Oh, sure. All right. Back in 2013, the city started the supplemental retirement system match. The supplemental retirement system is like a 401k that is run by the retirement system. It's like an investment account. Employees can choose to participate in that. We did have employees participating prior to the match, but the city decided that one of the ways we could incentivize our employees was to offer a little bit of an incentive to help them retire down the road when they hit their retirement age with the pension plan. We started that match at $250 a year, and we have increased that over about the last 10 years so that we are now matching up to $1,000, but the employee has to put in $1,250. That is a completely voluntary benefit. They do not have to participate if they do not want, and we do budget that full amount on the hopes that the employees will participate in that. One of the reasons the city looked at doing that is the retirement system pension is designed to replace about 55% of their income. When you retire at 55% plus Social Security, there's still a gap in their retirement savings. So the city wanted to incentivize them to have this benefit. It also does save the city money by doing this versus just increasing wages, as we do not pay FICA or Medicare matches on those dollars, and that is a pre-tax benefit to the employees, so it helps self-fund itself.
Say, Lisa, is
Yeah.
any of that tied to our bargaining?
Yes, the collective bargaining agreements have been involved in that, so yes, it is included in both the law enforcement as well as the city employee collective bargaining agreements.
So non-exempt employees would be generally covered by that,
Oh, absolutely, yes. Yep.
and so we've decided to as well extend that to exempt employees.
Yes, we have a policy that basically whatever is bargained for in the city employees union, which is our larger union, those benefits are extended to the non-exempt, non-collectively bargained employees as well as the salaried employees.
And that's full-time only?
Yes. Part-time employees can participate in the supplemental retirement plan, but they are not matched, with the exception of the ambulance has a small match into that for their part-time employees as an incentive. I don't think we have anybody that, maybe one, not anymore, yeah, that take advantage of that.
Question? How much does this cost the city? Oh, I'm sorry.
Come on up, Bernie.
How much does this cost the city every year?
If each employee were to participate, we have about 100 employees that are full-time benefited employees.
And how much?
So if it's $1,000 times 100 employees.
But not all employees.
Yeah, not all employees
all
participate, and they
employees
must
participate.
and they must match, like they must put in. So it's not just like an
But
increase.
what is the total amount every year that, with those that are in the program?
I will have to get that number for you. We budget the full amount, the full risk.
The $1,000.
Okay,
So it's less than that. Because not every employee participates.
right, I get that, but those that, I've heard different numbers, and I just, it costs the city roughly $144,000 a year with this match program.
No, it would be tops 1,000 times 100 employees, so $100,000 minus, well, that would be that.
Okay.
Yeah, and so if we have about a 75% participation rate, so we're looking at maybe $75,000 for this benefit.
Okay. She is reading my questions that I sent out today to the city council members, and I didn't know that she was going to be doing this, and I'm really surprised by this, because these were my questions that I had.
So I will say, Bernie, that I'm the one that forwarded them because I felt that it was important that you have the answers to your questions.
I understand that it was you that gave the questions to Lisa, but at the same time, I wanted this to come directly from me and not from a city employee.
Okay, thank you.
So the next question is, when did the city government decide to buy back unused vacation days? That policy or that practice was started back in 2017. The vacation buyback is limited to just salaried employees, and it is not the full unused and accrued vacation. So they have to roll over vacation, they have to use vacation, and then they can buy back up to half of their accrued amount. The reason for doing this is that many of your salaried employees do not take their full vacation. Basically, they're very hardworking employees for you, and so this was seen as a way to, while we want them to take that vacation and to be away from the workforce and recharge those batteries, unfortunately, sometimes that doesn't happen, so they do have this practice that buys that back.
Lisa, is there a max on that?
Yes, the employees can only accrue, if they're a 2-year employee, they get 80 hours of vacation. If they're a 3-year employee, they get 120. I'm sorry, a 5-year employee, they get 120. If they are a 10-year employee, they get 160 hours of vacation each year. So the max they could buy back would be half of that, whatever they've accrued.
Right, but they could buy back each year. Like, for example, the program I was under, there was a max. I think it was like 2 months of that I could buy back in my whole career.
It's an annual. So it's an annual, but again, the idea is that you use a minimum of the 40 hours. You take at least a week off, and then you'd roll over 40, and then could buy back a percentage of what's left.
And I can understand that. But there are some unintended consequences, and the key thing that I'm seeing is that it just kind of allows you not to be able to maintain a balance, right? Because there is a financial reward if I don't use up my leave. I was faced with the same stuff in the military, and I got to the point where it's kind of use or lose. And, I was just talking to my son who's in the Air Force, and he's in the same situation. But it forces you to use it. And at the end of the day, using your leave and maintaining that kind of balance and recharging your batteries probably overall provides more productivity efficiency. I don't necessarily think that we're going to be changing that for the 2024 budget, but maybe going forward, just have a discussion on it, because maybe from a HR people management perspective, on one hand, I can understand the empathy for that, but the other part is, kind of want them to take that leave.
Yep. Nope, there's definitely tension there.
Lisa, do we have comp time then?
We do not.
Okay.
Nope.
So salaried employees run what they run.
Yep. And they can manage it themselves. Some people do, if they've got really long 3 or 4 days, might bug out early on but no, we do not accrue it. So there's not a bank of comp time sitting there that's, made up. The next question is, what is a salaried bonus? Why and when do the full-time employees receive it? That was put into place 2015 as part of the 75th rally. There was a recognition by council that the salaried employees work pretty much a lot of hours during the rally and are not eligible for overtime. And so this was kind of a way to make up for the long hours that they're putting in. It was extended a couple years ago to be more of a performance bonus and not tied directly to the rally. So it is now more related to a performance, but does tie back to the rally to a certain degree as well. That line is on every budget that has a salaried employee. So that's why it's on there.
And how much is that?
It's up to 3%. It depends on the salaried employees. Some employees are not at that high of a rate.
On the performance side, is that tied to their evaluations?
No, it's done more informally by the council.
You think you would kind of be tied to, whatever your evaluation would be, but, okay.
These questions failed. Jump in if there's other ones. On the mayor and council budget, number 4111, there was a question on your line item under budget 4290, number 3, the Christmas holiday party employee education. We currently budget that at $7,000. The breakdown for that is $3,000 approximately for the employee meal, about $750 for employee recognition, $1,250 for employee and department recognition, and then $2,000 for employee education. That has also been extended to council. So if you go to the municipal league class, that comes out of that travel budget, I believe. That amount has been unchanged since 2019, and I'm pretty sure our Christmas party's right at...
I came in 16 years ago, and there was one 16 years ago. So it's probably prior to me.
Employee education is typically handled out of each department's budget. There was money put into the HR budget in 2023 to do leadership training. With everything going on, we have been unable to do that this year, but that was designed more for sorry, my kid just texted me. That was designed more for supervisory level, people that are maybe jumping into a supervisory training and giving them some of those tools off the ground. Counselor Wilkerson had a resource for us that we were exploring on that. There's a question also in that same budget on number 9, mayor and council giving. In 2024, you have budgeted $25,000. In 2023, you had budgeted $25,000 plus 15, Faye.
I'm not sure on that, and I didn't look into that.
And then in 2022, $25,000. That is the charitable giving that the council does each year. You guys have done that since 2001. Early on, the council actually took application from nonprofit organizations. You listened to presentations from the various nonprofits and then awarded budgetary, out of that $25,000, a budgetary allocation to them. A few years ago, the council opted to outsource that basically to the Sturgis Rally Charities. And so now, then they made recommendations to you and you still cut the checks to the nonprofit organizations. And then a couple years ago, you actually now just give the money directly to the Sturgis Rally Charities Foundation, and then they divvy out and delegate that money based on the need that they receive and have application for. There's also a contingency fund in there. That's your rainy day fund. It's the do not spend line. That is $80,000. That has been that way, I think, for
At least 12, 14 years.
phase tenure here,
Yeah.
or a very long time. And what that is designed to do is your department heads do a really good job of budgeting based on need that they have, an average need. So when things do come up, we have to take from cash on hand for emergency repairs or unexpected expenditures. That 80,000 basically provides you that cash on hand, so you're not dipping into your reserves and your savings. There's also a line 5510 in Mayor and Council. There was a
Lisa, can we back up just
please,
1 minute? As far as how much the taxpayer money is, this is in the general fund, so it is basically property tax and sales tax is what would be the source.
And there is a line, Faye's got a page in the budget that has all of your revenues for the general fund. So this is the Mayor and Council is funded out of that. Line 5510, Mayor and Council.
Lisa,
Oh, yeah.
not necessarily for you, but just more for the council. You know, as we get ready, you know, as we do this budget and next year in '24, we're starting to prepare for the 2025 budget. You know, this is an area that contingency, you know, as I've gone through and went through some of the budget training for the municipalities, you know, that's really kind of, here's what we anticipate our budget's going to be, but you know, it's always a little bit of guesstimate in that in terms of what you're going to have for revenue and what the expenses are. That contingency fund is really something for us to be able to have control of, to move, you know, to be able to make those adjustments. And it's something that would be controlled by the council. Not that I don't think a rainy day fund is not an important thing to have, but maybe we should label that differently to the extent that we can. But maybe in the 2025, what I was looking for is that, you know, like, for example, when we're doing the overtime budget, overtime expenses, you know, if we think here's what it's going to cost, then that's what we're going to program what it's cost. And don't fluff it up or anything, just based on what we have for that particular year and what the execution is. And then we have this contingency fund that, you know, we have kind of control of to be able to supplement those additional funds, but we have discussions on it. So again, just a point of discussion, something about as we start looking at the process in '24, getting ready for '25, I think that's an opportunity for us.
And those labels on the left-hand side, Councilor Jordan, are completely editable. We can call it whatever you want.
No, yeah, and no critique. I mean, we've been doing this for a long time, and just looking at, again, as we talked before about process improvements and those type of things, and one of the things we've been talking about is that budget process for 2025. And again, I'm not sure what the end state would look like, but that was just why you were bringing it up as just something I wanted to, you know, bring out.
Line 5510, Mayor and Council, there is a transfer of $110,000 to the ambulance fund. Why and where did that money come from? That is, as you know, the ambulance fund is financed by revenues that come from billing. It's also financed from a contract for services at the jail. They provide intake and medical services up there, MedPass. They also have an intubation contract with Monument. However, there is still a shortfall in that budget, and so this $110,000 is designed to fill that gap. It comes out of the general fund, correct, Faye? The revenues of the general fund.
Correct.
Why do we not just put it in the ambulance fund?
Go ahead.
Because it needs to be a transfer. That's how the revenue gets moved. Yeah, you know, there's not there's revenue for ambulance because it's an enterprise fund. It's two different funds, and so that $110,000 is still coming out of general fund because it's its own pot. So it's got to be a transfer into ambulance. It's not a part of the ambulance pot until we transfer it.
So like property tax.
It's just like and we transfer in different ways. So It's an accounting thing. I mean, it's how it's accounted for.
It's because that money is property tax, sales tax, and those general fund revenues,
Correct.
and those can't support the enterprise fund, so it's just a transfer that we do between the funds.
Correct.
Further questions, Councillor Forrester? No. Okay. There's a couple questions on planning and permitting. Citizens Serve user fees, that's under line 4220, professional fees. Citizens Serve is a software program that we put into place in 2016. I worked with Dave Smith to put that into place. Basically, it allows us to have a cloud-hosted platform for building permits, for inspections, for business licensing, vendor licensing, and it is split between various departments that use it. So planning and permitting has a line, I believe. Water has a line. There's several budgets that do fund that based on the users that they have. Meade County Times, public notices and hearings.
That's just a typo. We've just never got it changed over to Black Hills Pioneer, and it's for public notices.
Yeah, Bernie observed that this paper doesn't exist. So that's something we can update on that left-hand side. And then where did the where did the 2,000 from years 22 and 23 evaporate to the rest of their budget? That engineering used to be in the planning and permitting department. It was split out 2 years ago, Rick? Last year. And so planning and permitting has publication fees that they're responsible for, and I think a percentage just went with that. I don't believe engineering does any publications.
No, and it will be removed for 2025.
And then Bernie made the comment, over time, small amounts add up to bigger amounts. The departments and finance office might want to reread their budgets in order to check them over. There was a question on the custodial budget, the 4193. Again, it was about the supplemental retirement match and who receives it. Again, that's those full-time employees that are in the custodial budget. We have 4 full-time custodians as well out of that budget. So, finance office, there were there were some questions about the education in that. Were those contracts made before signing up for college fees and that stated the individual have to work for the city over a certain amount of time? Yes, there are educational agreements. We have done this in the finance office as well as the ambulance service. I know our engineer took a college course. Our previous engineer, 2 previous engineers took a college course. So we have done this in the past. And then there were some questions regarding the public notice of job openings within the city government, specifically about I believe the deputy finance office position of the finance officer. There was a question about Faye's retirement buyout. As you know, Faye is retiring. That's in the finance budget as well. 4130 is the line. Basically, when employees leave the city, they are eligible to take any unused but accrued vacation at full wage. So if they have 2 weeks sitting on the books, they get 2 weeks at that hourly wage. Employees who have been with the city for longer than 10 years are eligible to buy out the sick leave portion of their PTO. The sick leave is only paid at 50% of the total accrued. The max they can accrue is 1,000 hours, and they get that paid at 75% of their final wage. So the sick leave is not, like vacation is basically you get 100% of your wage at the number of hours you've got. Sick leave is a discounted, they get half the hours at 75% of the wage. There's some questions in rally and events and sponsorship, but there was the comment, our city town cannot afford monetary mistakes or lavish trips to Nevada, California, or salaries made up from 4 or 5 departments. Regarding employees that you see across multiple budgets, basically that is done based on their job duties. So for example, we have like the executive assistant upstairs, 50% of her wage comes out of the city manager, 50% comes out of planning and permitting due to the duties and hopefully the division of work that they're having. Most of the finance office, I believe, Faye, are split between the finance office and water for utility billing. The public works administrative assistant is one of those ones that's split amongst several different positions. Our planning coordinator is that way.
Admin for public works.
Yep.
I got that.
Who else? Community center, Rod Hikus, the community center director, comes out of recreation and community center. Again, those are trying to allocate the wages for that person across the correct, the correct budget.
And could I say just one thing about Adam taking my place and becoming finance officer from deputy finance? Yesterday, I hosted the finance officers of the Black Hills. I had 11 different ladies here. And the first thing they said is when we sat down and started visiting is this city don't know how lucky they are that they have some kind of a succession plan, and that Adam is getting to know so much and me trying to give him as much as I can to go on. So any of the other cities thinks we're really very lucky of how we're doing this.
Unless there are any other questions for me, I thank the council for giving me the opportunity to answer the questions. I hope that gave you some information. Bernie, I hope that gave you the clarity you were looking for as well. And if there's any other questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Otherwise, I'm going to go sit in the back.
Go ahead. No questions for you, Lisa. Just another comment for the council, just another opportunity. When it comes down to the education piece of it, I think what the opportunity we have for 2025 is, it's to kind of shore up our internal policies that describes what that is and make sure it's, clear and consistent and fair, and then maybe there's a process that reviews those applications and makes those decisions. Again, I just think just to tighten it up and, again, have a process when it comes down to making those selections. So, again, I think that's a good opportunity for us in 2025. Yeah, sure. Based on Becca's, one thing that from the legal and finance, and we've been talking as chairperson for other committees is, as we get into 2024 and we start that process for 2025, and essentially is start that process relatively early. Basically as soon as we get into 24, we'll have to provide some kind of budget guidance, to the staff. That budget guidance could be some based on goals and objectives, anything from our comprehensive plans, things that we need to still address. Any of those other kind of priorities, capital improvements, have an update on that capital improvement. So that basically informs what our priorities are as we see it kind of going into that year. So the staff would have that first 3 months or so. We're still working on the timelines on this, but that first 3 months or so to kind of develop an actual budget like we've done in the past. But instead of having it presented to the council in that July, August timeframe, have it presented sometime, that late first quarter, March, early April. And then that second quarter of the year, we'll start doing budget hearings, which would, from the department heads and the city manager and other direct reports to the council, to be able to go through the budgets kind of line by line, look at each of the activity lines and all the objects underneath that. It just allows the council to have an understanding of, where the money's going. Does it address the priorities? It basically just gives us all that information. I could tell you, I've sat down. I didn't get to go through with all the department heads, but I did sit down and went through like the public works, went through the police department. And so there's always opportunities that, I was able to get more educated on what those departments were doing. So again, not just for myself, but for all the council going forward, for all members that would become council members in the future, you'd have this process that you would be involved in, understand, and then help kind of understand what those priorities are. And then as we get into the summer months, and again, we are an events town, not just the Sturgis rally. We have a lot of other events, and we started getting relatively busy from a council and from a city staff. But by that time, we've already kind of done all the heavy lifting, and now we're doing is dotting the I's, crossing the T's. I would envision we would do these budget hearings. It would be during a work session. That would be an opportunity for the community to listen in, maybe not being involved in it, but to listen in on that. And so again, provide some transparency there. So again, that's something that Becca, as the chairperson for the finance committee, has asked from several of us to kind of brainstorm that. Again, that's just kind of a rough. We still have to go through that with the committees. That has to be approved by the council. But again, that's at the end of the day, it may change a little bit, but to start the process earlier, get the council more involved, understand what the issues are, and then communicating those priorities. And then when we get into the summer months, we pretty much got to, 95% done. We're just dotting the I's, crossing the T's. We can focus in on the events as we get into the fall, doing the first reading, second reading. We'll be farther ahead of the game.
Thank you, Aaron, for, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. Thank you, Aaron, for explaining that. kind of the thoughts and ideas that you and I and the other council members are looking at. I think, you know, as the city, we are going through this transition period. You know, there's a lot that we're learning, and I think how I'm viewing it is just the opportunity for us to solidify the processes and to make sure that we have the communication with the department heads for the budget. And of course, an important aspect of that is to also bring along the public and anyone who has questions. Because as you can see that, you know, there's a lot of information here. We're looking at 65 pages for our department budgets. You know, this isn't a small lift here. So anyway, I just want to concur with what Aaron had said in that we really are trying to make this process educational for not only the council, but the public as well. And by moving all of this to the left on the calendar, by starting after New Year, I think we are ensuring that we're giving enough time for the questions, for the communication to happen. And I just want to say publicly to Bernie, I meant no disrespect or offense by forwarding this. I just wanted to make sure that your questions had the information that you were seeking. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Doreen moved forward here, so we'll have some pointed questions for us.
Well, I have some questions, observations, and perhaps a little maybe insight. Okay. In August, after I read Brandon's story about the $31 million proposed budget, I asked the finance office for a copy of the line item budget. Only because, as you know, those of us up at Meade County are going through a similar process right now. A process that Kevin might say re-grill the department heads. We make them justify every dollar.
I've heard it was more of an investigation or
Interrogation, right. But you know, along with that, I look at the city and the county is also a joint partnership. And one reason I wanted the line item was we all have employees oftentimes doing similar jobs and offices that might have similar expenses. So like any business, you want to know also what the competition is paying, what they're charging, etc. Sadly, I never got the budget, but I got it from someone else who did have the budget. And when it comes to the budget, the first thing I always look at is the means of finance. Well, no, actually, the first thing I look at is this budget has 24, 23, 22. I think the one that I got didn't have 21. But what was most important to know right along the line items is how much has been expended so far to that date. Because otherwise, you do not know if your guesstimate on any of those other prior budget years was accurate. And our budgets are nothing more than a guesstimate based on what we hope is sound information. And that isn't, sometimes we find out our information is not so sound. Sometimes it's a little rocky. But since that wasn't there, that made going through the budget a little more difficult. But since that revenue sheet just came out, I went back through this budget, and then I started at the front page, that's always the key, and that is the means of finance, your revenue. And I know that Sturgis was unaware that TIFs couldn't be used. Meade County hasn't used them for a number of years. But I think you might have to cut the budget some more based on what I saw on your revenue receipts. And I'm going to give you a couple of examples. One is under 34,121. You list that as 100,000. But I looked up on your receipts so far, and you know that's $200 this year, and the rally's over. So you might be off $96,000. I then looked up, I saw the rally e-commerce. You'd budgeted $125,000 for that. Your receipts fell far short from that in 23, along with that prior one with your cup sales. That fell short. So that's all going to affect your cash carryover. It's not only going to affect your cash carryover at the end of the year on December 31st. If you put in that same number, this number was actually increased about 2.5 times for this year, even though it didn't come anywhere near close. So I'm just telling you, you might end up in a budget problem. And then I noticed that the community center income from fees and stuff was projected to be up about 25%, even though its history has been pretty level. And so far, you have only taken in 117,000. I also wondered why, and another reason I got a little further into this was I did hear Faye on the council meeting say that the sponsorship fund was in the red at your last council meeting. So once I got the revenue thing, I did really go through that to see.
And
But-
just to interrupt you on that, we just went through that, and we've had some people not coding the correct numbers in there, and sponsorship, some of it should have been into rally and events. So sponsorship is not in the red.
Okay, so
It's
then
just
you,
been it was a mistake of
misspoke. Okay. Well, the reason why I bring this up is I couldn't tell exactly how much you'd gotten, but what concerned me was in 22 you budgeted $532,000 for income from that. And then this current year you budgeted $390,000. Next year you only anticipate $300,000. So I guess my question is, are sponsorships falling off, or is this a mistake? Because on the line item above that, you underestimated your revenue. You had budgeted $675,000 for this year, and you made $710,000. So that led me to think, why are you estimating to receive $100,000 less this year? Or is some of that locations that you rented going to be dedicated to future sponsorships? Or are you going to lower your rental rates? Okay, these are the kind of questions we ask when we go through the budget. And if we find something wrong in 24, we don't wait to 25 to change it, because you haven't passed first reading yet, so you haven't done anything to your budget yet. And so I was concerned on the sponsorship, and I wondered why from, and like I said, I just did a quick thing, and I certainly do not know all the ins and outs of what's gone on around here. But like I said, we all have to work together, and we all have to make the best return for our tax dollars for our citizens that we can. And I noticed that it costs twice the amount to rent spots for sponsors than you had budgeted. So that I kind of wondered why. And then I am curious as to exactly what your dollar amount for sponsorship was. And then I also wondered why all the extra police that are brought in that I understand protect sponsors' property, why that's under the police budget rather than under the sponsorship budget, because as I understand it, that's part of the sponsorship. So if you want to really track everything, perhaps that should be there. And let me see if I can think of anything else. Oh, another thing. The e-commerce is still projected to be 300,000, but you didn't have sales anywhere near there. Way down, which again is going to, if that trend continues, you're going to have you're going to have a budget shortfall. And but you did make more. You did make $34,000 more in advertising, which is great. I noticed the city manager budget is over by about 14% from what it was projected to cost for the overall year. And I know Daniel left in April, so I guess, was there a severance package, or how could that budget already be over when only 67% of the year had transpired and he'd been gone after 3 or 4 months? And then, okay. What?
Did you want?
Sure, because I couldn't understand that.
So with the transition team, the mayor and council has given those members a stipend, and that was based on the wage that was earned by the city manager. And then the mayor was added to that team. So there has been more expended in those stipends than the wage was. And then there was also that vacation and sick leave buyout that I mentioned earlier. All employees are eligible for that.
Okay, so his had to be pretty significant. And then this is, let's see, I keep getting messages. You know, our department heads requested about a third more than they're going to get. And, you know, they know that every year, but we kind of look at it as also indirectly a future planning document, because they know they're not going to get it, but so we also know what's coming down the pike in the future. And I think it's great we have things like the mayor's ride, but I really question spending $34,000 to Jack Daniels to buy the liquor. I think Jack Daniels should give the liquor, and if they don't give the liquor, then I don't think the mayor's ride participants should get the liquor, especially since the mayor's ride only brought in $69,000. Am I being cheap? Yes. But I look at that as taxpayer money. And I also look at the fact Jack Daniels has got a lot more money than the city of Sturgis does in its taxpayers. And if it really wants it, part of its sponsorship, throwing in $34,000 for that, Jack, is not even a drop in one of their barrels, but it's a huge drop in ours. And so I'm kind of tight in some of those areas. And so I hope I didn't bore any of you, but I do think I'd look at my means of finance, because you might have to do some additional cutting or do some, maybe you got more cash carryover you can have. Oh, I know, I was going to ask. I saw you get $450,000 in interest income. Where does that come from?
The TIFs.
The
We
tip.
we do internal TIFs. All of our TIFs right now are internal except one. And internal means that we self-funded them.
Oh, you self-funded. At what interest rate then?
5%, most of them.
Are they all 5%? You said most.
Most of them.
What are the others?
I think there was one that was 3%.
Okay.
But
The county right now is getting $66,000 a month on a money market at the bank. And so, I'm surprised it's 5%. I was thinking you might, since some of those
well,
tips
these
are
these
older.
are all TIFs. Yeah, these are older
Okay.
TIFs.
I would think.
Pre interest rates like they are now.
Yeah, that's why I'm surprised you said 5%, because I would be thinking, since the interest rates were much lower when a lot of those started, that they would have gone to the bank instead, because the interest rates would have been lower. But anyway, we're really happy that we get about 5% on our interest, and compared to hardly nothing before.
And just to let you know, on the e-commerce, we are trying to grow our e-commerce right now. We're trying to build that, and try, for one reason is just to get our logo out there, our marks, and so we are trying to build that e-commerce. Are we probably a little high? Probably, but we are trying to do that, and Tammy's doing a good job at trying to get that.
Yeah, I noticed it was exceedingly high, and the cost to do that, I believe, is excessive.
Well, and part of the reason we're doing it is marketing. It's almost a marketing thing.
I know it's a marketing thing, and this is the last thing I'm going to say as far as marketing. As most of you know, I spent a great deal of my life in marketing, advertising, and sales, and I can see I'm putting Mark to sleep. But sometimes you can reach a saturation point. There's very few corners of this earth that do not know Sturgis has a motorcycle rally, and when. We have some very large corporations such as Buffalo Chip, Harley Davidson, Indian, Full Throttle, etc., that spend a huge amount of money on advertising. It might be interesting to see what would happen if 1 year the city not pay extra advertising. And I agree completely with Becca when she pointed out one time, I think it was $25,000 on that state project, and they didn't show any pictures of Sturgis at all. And this year, our governor went to Deadwood and went to Buffalo Chip, and we're still going to give the state another $25,000 to advertise a town that the governor bypasses. And the county isn't perfect.
Tuesdays, county courthouse.
Mr. Mayor?
Go ahead.
Hey, Doreen, I for one appreciate the trip to the woodshed, so thanks.
No, I'm coming back.
Well, I got the
Just
I got
up
the
your time,
microphone
Doreen.
first, though.
I did not mean that as a trip to the woodshed.
Well, hold on, before you go on,
Okay.
is that, and I've talked to Bernie about this, and that's one thing in our process as we go forward, is that I really like when we have our citizens of our town, hold us accountable. And I appreciate everything that you said. Everything that you talked about, what the county does, that process, that's what we want to emulate. We haven't been doing that for a very, very long time. So it's a process, a little bit of a change to go from what we've done in the past to basically emulate what the county wants to do. So again, I appreciate everything that you said.
Well, thank you.
It gives us more information based on that experience as we start developing our plan for 2025. Don't disagree that 2024 is still here and we still got to go through the first reading. But overall, at the end of the day, for me, I'm looking for opportunities. And the biggest opportunity for us is to change a process that's durable, that allows the council to do exactly what the county's been doing with the commissioners and their department heads, and have a better understanding, and again, allows you, the commissioners, us as the council, to ensure that we're meeting the priorities of what our community has. So again, when I was saying woodshed, it's just trying to provide some levity, a little bit of joke. But again, I do appreciate the insight that you provided. That's all.
Well, I really would look at my means of financing before I adopt my budget, or else, unless you got a lot of money in the bank, you might be in trouble at the end of the year.
Well, some of the things
Next
that you talked, in that process, and we've had this discussion within our own team.
And I know Faye doesn't agree, but that's okay.
Well, within our own team, is that when you look at like 21, 22, for what I would like to see is not what we budgeted that year, is what we actually spent that year. And then on top of that, for the year that you're in, you kind of want to know what your execution rate is, and stay on top of that. And that's something that Becca has talked to me about, is to have a better process of the review of the current year. So when we go into the next year's budget process, that's informing that next budget process. So again, everything that you're doing in the county, that's what we want to emulate.
Well, that's good. We get a monthly review so we know where we're at and on a track. And like I said, without knowing how much money had been expended, you have no idea. You're in the dark. Thank you. Any other questions? I didn't mean to. See, I've already hurt Kevin. It's just bringing back, he's going through PTSD.
Any other discussion? Council, go ahead, Kevin.
In the revenue piece, we've got a line item for administrative service.
Yes.
I understand that's the work we do out of our enterprise funds for collecting our water bills and doing our sewer billing and those sorts of things.
Legal advice, HR advice.
As I look from the 22, 23 to 24 budget, it looks like there's a substantial reduction in that. Am I reading that wrong? And what's the reason behind that?
In the water department accounting service?
It is under
Yeah, 34,150.
34,150 exactly.
That's just based, what Daniel based that on was wages. He has a formula, and it was in that first, when I sent you guys all out the worksheets, the actual Excel worksheets. It had that formula in there. It's not a number that is just derived from it. It's based on, and I think one reason it's come up is because we've got new, like engineering become its own group, custodian, that type of thing. And so you pay based on what the budget is for those departments. And so that's why I believe that it went up, because I think fleet was in there, and fleet used to not be in there. And so that's why it's gone from, 217, but now down to 212. It's just based on the departments, what their
Give me 1 second here, please. It looks like in 23 we have a budget in that number 34,150 of 682,000. But this document that we're looking at here right now, that was handed out today, shows 150,000. So we add,
I guess I'm not sure where you're looking at Kevin.
so there's 3 items there. So
Oh,
we gotta
at
add
the end, you're
352,
looking now, you're looking at
213,
the bottom of
150.
are you looking at the bottom of the revenue budget now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, okay. So the transfer, that transfer is the one that I had told you that we were going to make, the 212, it went from 150 to 212. That's the transfer that I told you guys that we did to make the budget balance. And that was because we had to decrease. And so that was, I think it was one of my last bullet points, is that we would have to borrow some money or we'd have to do a transfer from wastewater to general fund, and we had it at 62,000. But there was an offset to that, because when we adjusted the HRA and that stuff, it actually it was not quite the 62,000. So you are going to see changes in because when we do that HR change at $1,300, $1,800 to $1,300, you're going to see changes in the enterprise funds, because the enterprise funds have wages in them, and they have this HRA in it. And so you're going to see changes in the water. Some of them isn't very much, because it just depends on, who's involved in that. So, but there is some changes from that. But I had included the wastewater, that would be a change.
So I'm having a hard time understanding how that's working. I mean, because the next thing that's coming, what we've discussed about is a raise of our base rates for water and wastewater.
Correct, and that's for operations of those.
Well, those operations funds also pay these administrative fees, do they not?
I would say yes.
So it's a little concerning that we're moving money out of our enterprise funds and I'm not sure how to justify $734,000 to bill for water and sewer for a year. I'm just concerned that we are doing a little bit to stack an additional load on our utility billing at the cost of our utility billing, but to benefit our taxpayers. I'm probably not communicating that clearly, but it appears that it's a little bit of just a moving money around thing, and it's. Is that truly a cost? I mean, to go through and add up those few wages. I mean, that's $734,000.
The one that you were first talking about, the one in water, that is the one that's based on that. Lisa, do you happen to have that up? Yes, the tab that it has, to get the administrative.
So to go along with that, I didn't see on the list that we were making a transfer out of our enterprise wastewater fund.
I have it right here on the list.
Have I overlooked that?
Yeah. We should pull 62,000 from the wastewater fund. And that was part of the deal.
Here, Faye. That's the administrative for you, Faye.
I think a little bit further down, Lisa.
Oh.
So there is the numbers that right there, that middle right there, administrative charges, wastewater sanitation.
Right here.
And they may be adjusted a little.
Update this.
Yeah. Three.
1.7 FTE costs $700,000.
No, it actually, so the departments up there on the left are the ones that go into the total administrative fee. So you're looking at mayor and council, attorney, finance, HR, city manager, insurance, custodial, information technology, and engineering. And fleet, Faye?
Yeah, and fleet.
I'm having a hard time understanding that, I guess. Why do we have an administrative fee for mayor and council?
Because you oversee those enterprise funds as well as the general fund. So the philosophy behind it is that the leadership and the expense for the mayor and council is split over all of your funds, not just the general fund, since you're financed out of the general fund through the budget.
Doesn't the MUB oversee the water?
There's no expense to them, though. And you guys do the sanitation and the wastewater utilities.
I think it's going to take a while to fully understand that, because it seems like we are ending up with our utility rates higher than we should out of the process.
Rick,
But-
didn't you just look into that, and we are still second lowest in the, didn't you just get all the salary rates? And lead was the only one that was highest, or lower than us.
As we continue through the process, one of the recommendations is we take $150,000 out of our equipment replacement fund.
Correct.
That seems like we are potentially burdening future councils because we're not keeping up with our equipment replacement plan. Rick, would you address that for us? Do you agree with that? Can we manage that?
I think, we came up when we had the shortfall, that was one of the things we looked at. And originally we had, we have our equipment purchases on a schedule similar to our capital improvement fund, where we have a 5-year plan. We have a 5-year plan for equipment replacement as well. This year for 2024, we were supposed to purchase a motor grader outright, pay for it, and we're supposed to do the same thing in 2025 so that we could get rid of some of our older equipment. Based on where we were at in the process, we decided that we could potentially go back to a lease. So that's what we decided to do this year, is to lease and lessen that burden. And part of the reason because that too is because the equipment prices went up, and what we were able to buy them for 2 years ago, they had gone up substantially. And so the money that even we had budgeted, we wouldn't have been able to outright purchase that. So that kind of was off the table anyways. So we decided early on that we would look at doing a lease. And so it did free up some money there that we could potentially, and again, I would say it's more of a short term, and I don't know that we have a plan or anything in place for 2025, which we had another major equipment purchase that we were going to do. So, I think this does get us through and it buys us some time, but we certainly have to look at that probably on a longer period. We certainly need to make it whole. We've got certain equipment, and it's not just public works. The equipment replacement is everything from vehicles, from finance to everything. To the side-by-sides, garbage trucks, loaders, bobcats. Everything is kind of on a schedule. So if we do short that, it will eventually catch up to us. We're going to have to make that money back up sometime to be able to stay on that equipment replacement, or we're going to get to a spot. We're finally getting to a point where we are able to have newer equipment. It creates efficiencies, things like that. We're going to start to go backwards to where we have all of this old aging equipment, and that's part of the problem that we have now. Is we have some equipment that's actually obsolete and we can't even get parts for it. And so even though it still runs, when we do have a breakdown or a malfunction in it, we can't get the parts to even repair it. So that's why we started to put together a plan to do equipment replacement and to do a little bit each year, so.
Hey, Rick, it looks like you have two approaches. You have purchase the equipment that you maintain for a period of time, and at some point you trade off for something different, or you have the lease. So what you're saying is purchasing the equipment is cheaper to the city long-term
Yes.
versus the lease. So even though we're not going to be purchasing the 150 this year, we're still going to be doing that. Overall, we're still increasing our overall net of what it's going to cost us, because we're still going to buy the equipment at a later date. But in the meantime, we're still paying whatever that rate is for lease equipment.
It'll cost us more, yes.
And again, we're not necessarily saving any money. I mean, at some point, either we have to, that particular year that we buy that equipment, we either have to, lower priority something else, or coming up with some additional revenue to pay for that, or we start saving money, in the near term to, get ready for that larger purchase.
Correct.
But it looks like right now we're not doing that, or I mean, we're basically just kind of banking on that we're going to have additional revenue, or we're going to take it from the budget in 25 or 26.
Correct.
Mr. Mayor? Rick, am I wrong in remembering a conversation around this, and it was lease to own, though? It was still with the potential to own?
So we do, yes. We have at the end of whatever lease term we select, we have a final buyout payment.
Okay.
When you add that up versus outright purchasing versus, and it's similar to, we even did that with copy machines. And for a long time, we were leasing them, and then we figured out, hey, it's cheaper to just buy it and own it than it is to pay the lease. Same with big equipment. So, yeah, we will pay, I don't know what the percentage, I could get that for you, what the difference is, but leasing it, doing a lease with a final option to buy it, which is what we did with our last two big pieces of equipment, does cost us more than to outright simply buy it.
And not to discredit anything, but we're focusing on Rick's department specifically, but I do know for a fact that our airport's equipment is down in the dumps, and we've had to call Rick to come up and help open the airport. Our airport, luckily, is one of the only airports, if not the only airports in the state that are general aviation that makes money, profitable. And we are, at this point, not getting them any more equipment to keep that airport open year-round, which, if it's not open, we're not getting fuel sales, we're not getting people there. So we may end up losing money if we don't buy equipment as well. So I think we do need equipment replacement. That's an emergency at this point, especially for the airport.
The last couple years, too, we have not purchased as much as we had been purchasing. To build that up, we were trying to build it up for his graders and stuff. So, I mean, it's not like it's at zero or anything, because we have cut back on cars, vehicles, only one vehicle instead of two vehicles, that type of thing.
Thank you, Rick.
Thank you.
Any other discussions?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make one other comment.
Go ahead, Kevin.
I don't mean disrespect in the automatically taking 150 from the equipment budget, but it sure looks like we took the easy way out of trying to balance our budget. And that we do have other places that we can make cuts. Maybe not big cuts everywhere, but a series of small cuts, death by 1,000 paper cuts, so to speak, that will help us preserve our equipment replacement, still fund our capital improvement, and keep our city moving forward and not tie future councils to the problems that we are creating today. I think some of them have been discussed here. I'm not sure how to start picking on them other than to just start picking on them. I know we're trying to do certain things with the rally, but our revenue is down, our expenses are up. In holding to what our city needs to do, I think that's one of the places that we need to further review, because I believe there's monies there that will help us keep our budget balanced not take monies from our enterprise funds that end up in raising taxes just in another, or raising fees in another area, and, you know, keep us moving forward.
Maybe some other opportunities here in trying to provide some funds as much as we can for the equipment replacement. You know, just going through, you know, I think we lowered it 15,000 for the city manager. I'm showing we have 145 right now. Is that?
That's correct.
And I think right now our intent is probably not even going to start that process until after the first of the year, depending on when the lawsuit's decided. And even then, it's going to be a little while before we have finished that process. I don't know if that 145 is at an actual, you know, if we're assuming maybe 1 April, 1 May would be the soonest, could there be some savings there? The second one is on the city engineer. I know that we've been without this engineer for a little while. I know Lisa's, it's been open for a long time. I don't think we got any applications at this point. And I know Rick has been doing some outsourcing to some engineer firms here for some of the development that we have, just to do some review on those plans to make sure that those things are meeting the standards. Is that something for, let's say, for this next year in 2024, or a big chunk of 2024, would we, Rick, and I guess maybe this is for you and Lisa, would we save anything by continuing doing outsourcing, or would that equal up to about the same amount that we have projected for a city engineer? And Lisa, obviously you work in HR, so I'd value your input on that too.
I think it solely depends on how much we're using them, you know, and what our capital improvement plan looks towards. I mean, for the most part, everything that we have programmed now in 2024, most of the engineering and the work is done. So what we're looking at outsourcing for is for some plan reviews. So it really depends on how much development we have from, but certainly wouldn't be, in my mind, would not be equivalent to having a full-time staffer. I think it would be substantially less than that.
Lisa, if you want to comment, please do. As she's coming up, you know, long term, I think we would want to have a city engineer, but I know one of the things that we've been talking about is, you know, as we get ready for a new city manager, you know, kind of right-sizing things. And, you know, one of the things that we could use in our community is kind of is a planning part of it, planning development. And so it might be an opportunity, and that could be a city engineer, could have all the right talents to be able to help us not just provide oversights of projects, but also have some oversight as we continue to grow and develop. Or maybe we need to take some time and look at what those duty descriptions, what the certifications, education requirements would be for that. Now, granted, we haven't made any final decisions, but since we haven't made any final decisions, maybe it'd makes sense to kind of put that on hold until we do get a final decision. So whatever we're going to hire, it meets the need that we have. But in the meantime, we could continue doing outsourcing. It sounds like we've done a lot of it already, but I'll turn it over to you, Lisa.
I would completely agree with what Rick had said. We're going to have little projects that are going to come up. I'm having a city engineer that can review and stamp plans for sidewalks and just those little small projects that we're deferring right now just because they don't rise up to the level of, and correct me, Rick, if I say something out of line, but having that city engineer to manage also the engineering contracts is very helpful. I would say that cutting that budget, I would be cautious too. I mean, we can do that. It's just we do have to have that outsourced. I mean, basically, the professional fees are still going to come out of engineering. So we'll have, if we cut that too much, and then that will pretty much also, if we cut it too much, guarantee that I'm going to have a great city engineer show up in January.
Well, and again, we may find a great engineer, but I still think we should probably make sure that's what we want.
Mm-hmm. But
you know, because we can't
retool-
necessarily always afford a city engineer and a planner, or maybe we can, but I think that's still, the analysis has to, you know, figure what that is.
And if you retool it, you're still looking for wages and compensation for that position. So regardless of what you call it, there is money in that budget for it. It
kind of goes back to Kevin, just, you know, a lot of slices here. You know, I don't think, obviously there's going to be a cost against that engineer position, same thing with the city manager, but there may be some savings that could come out of that could be pushed over to, and those are just a couple examples. There may be some other ones. You know, for example, I know from my time in the military, where every time we had budget contraction, a lot of our travel would get, reduced significantly. We'd end up doing a lot more phone calls, a lot more Zoom calls, and so our travel budget would be somewhat non-existent for maybe a year until those things kind of healed up. I'm not saying that we want to take the travel budget away, but you could maybe reduce it by 10%. And there may be some other things out there that, in terms of what the impact would be, might be less, probably would be less than the impact of not, doing the equipment stuff right now and preparing even if we don't buy the equipment this year, that we're putting money in account that's cash on hand for the future. So, we're not necessarily raising taxes or trying to rob Peter to pay Paul continuously. So again, just looking at opportunities.
So can I make one more comment on the transfer? Because I know we've talked about that and that's confusing too. So I'm going to confuse you some more. Doing that $150,000 transfer, that is something you can put in there, but you don't have to do. So all the transfers that are normal ones that we've done for years, I do it in a monthly, take it out monthly, right, split it up. But if you would want us to keep that 150 in there as a transfer, we wouldn't have to do it if we think we can get through in the general fund okay. You're taking a chance, but so say we don't hire no engineer, there's not, there won't be, any money coming out of there, or we don't get a city manager, we won't get any, there's nothing going to be taken out of it, which there will be, because we talked about that if the stipend continues into the next year. So that's another thing. But that transfer, even though we're putting that in there right now, we don't have to do it. It's an accounting tool that I could move it, but we don't have to. So I don't know if you'd want to take a chance of doing that. Just leaving it there, and then I not move it unless the general fund is in trouble. It's still making the general fund balance, but like I said, we would not have to do that transfer if we did not want to.
So basically reduces your cash on hand.
Correct.
For the sake of discussion, I spent some time last night putting a spreadsheet together out of just a few things. I mean, it's kind of hard because it's a PDF, and so could be errors, but we talked about the supplemental retirement. We talked about 100 employees that are eligible for it, but my math of that line item shows that we're paying $144,500 in that. So if there happens to be an error there of some sort, it would sure be a good time to capture that.
Sure.
Are they all doing the maximum contribution of their own?
Well, it doesn't appear so, because one budget, for example, recreation, it's $330 is what's budgeted. So obviously we must be trying to match. Split?
Yes.
Okay. That makes sense. Once again, not professing that I transposed every number right, but it looked like $144,500 total budget for all that. The unused vacation and salaried bonus is $87,700. $375,000 of overtime, which obviously in public safety and public works, I mean, those are 24-hour operations, and we never know what we're going to come up against. Those teams have it, but there's substantial overtime in different budgets that are scattered around, and so in this time where we're trying to preserve our long-term future and make sure that we can live through this, as Faye put it, short-term condition, it seems like we should try and tighten the belt in the overtime. Faye, you made the comment that out of the 34,000 that we had departments bring out, this was in an email, I believe, that you said that they took cuts in various places, and I think travel was one of them. I haven't really pulled that together, but based off of what was originally, what was attached to the budget right now, we've got $101,985 in travel. Yeah, in a time when most of our trainings and whatnot are remote. And so, back to the comments on trying to find small amounts all over to help us make up the big number. It seems like those are moves. I would be interested, you made the comment that the bonus piece was by council action. I think it was it 2015, what you said? I would like to review that because I don't mean any disrespect, Mr. Mayor, but under a city manager government or city manager operation, all councilors, including the mayor, are consistent and even, but it was a staff action that ended up with a stipend landing on your plate. And I think that would be a very reasonable thing to, pending your agreement, adjust, because, for example, our capital improvement plan, it took Councilor Jordan, I don't know how long, a week, 2 weeks, working with Rick to try and sort that out so we could keep that on board. I think during this time where lots of people are picking up lots of pieces, and we're hoping that everybody is picking up evenly. So I think if we look at some of those, if we look at just where our revenue is, look at where our costs are, where we try and, take some out of, some meat out of our rally, because it does seem, and I'm not anti-rally, but, we're making our taxpayers suffer on other sides when we're bringing this forward without the numbers adding up. That $50,000 out of each one of those budgets would be a reasonable move, and I'm not sure what the coding thing means, but the report that was provided shows that our current sponsorship is $3,800 in the red. So I'm not sure what we're going to end up with what you indicated were coding problems.
Well, the sponsorship, you have to look at the leases that was never budgeted for 2023. So you've got a shortfall there. But other than that, there has been stuff that's been coded to that should have been coded to rally. And like I said, we went through it today and seen those problems, and those will be fixed.
What was your estimation about the amount there?
As far as what the leases,
No, the amount of miscoded.
we only found the two, right, Lisa? But they were large ones, 40,000 and 10,000, I believe.
So 50,000.
50,000.
It was the Motorcycle Industry Council and the lease for the activation there. It was supposed to come out of the supplement you guys did to the rally and events budget, the 200,000 this year. And so that went into rally and events, but the expenses came out of sponsorship, so they'll be moved over because that's where they should have been coded to with that supplement.
I agree with what Aaron said, that we're waiting essentially for our Supreme Court, and it sounds like it could be the first of the year. The process that we took, that we were on, that ended up ultimately failing because the candidates withdrew. We're 6 months in, even if we would have hired, if one of them would have been successful. So it does seem reasonable to make adjustments to the city manager wage thing, and that trickles down as well. So somewhere along the line there, we're getting pretty close to being able to preserve the equipment fund and hopefully not take any from the enterprise wastewater fund, because I am definitely not in favor of double tapping, if we will, raising our utility rates and still raising our mill levy to try and make our budget balance.
Hey, Mr. Mayor, not a motion, but maybe a solution to discuss is, we've talked about, there's multiple places where we could probably look at from the budget. Again, these are some of the things just from, a 20,000-foot level looking down. Now, there may be other additional impacts we haven't considered. So a solution may be is that, go back to the staff, and we still may be able to do a first reading, because this might be a smaller impact. But look at what we can do. We can look at, the additional wage that was provided to your position when we had the transition team, understanding that really we still have the same kind of form of government and the duties, responsibilities haven't changed. We could look at the city manager, we could look at other, the city engineer. Kevin talked about sponsorship rallies. There might be some other additional things that we could pull up. I'm not sure if we can get to 150,000. And kind of going back to what you were saying, Faye, maybe instead of doing, the general fund, is that, let's just, for example, we got up to say 100,000 that we kind of, slice pieces out of the budget. We were able to come up with 100,000 saved. And the other 50,000, we'd say we put into a contingency fund. And that would be that $50,000, or it's $100,000, whatever that amount is. As we get into the year, then we can take a look at our projections in '23, kind of going back to what Doreen was saying, when our means of finance, did our assumptions that we had for '23, are we going to have as much or more or less cash in hand when we go into '24? And then we'd have a little bit of money there to be able to either go to equipment, new equipment, or we would move it to the general fund to take care of what those additional expenses are. But it kind of gives us a little bit of flexibility, but it also gives the staff an opportunity who probably appreciates those impacts to be able to take a look at that and, come up with a solution that comes up with either 150,000 or close to it, and the rest of it we could put into a contingency fund that we would have control of to move where we need to based on what that cash flow looks like at the end of the year. Or cash on hand at the end of the year. Now, I'm open to other suggestions. I'm just trying to move us forward.
So I guess the only thing I'd like to suggest, I would like you guys to point out exactly what amount you want, where you want it from, and that we still go through with this first reading. And I know you said just the 150, but then am I hearing another 62,000 that you want to try to get caught up on for the wastewater, so it goes back down to 150? I'm not quite sure on what you were saying with the wastewater.
Well, my goal would be to try and come up with 212. So you were talking 62 out of...
So 212 and 150.
No, 62 and 150, correct?
Oh,
Am I?
okay, that's what I just asked, yeah.
Yeah, oh, I thought you...
No, and we'd keep the 150 there, and it wouldn't be 212, it would be 150 then. Because that's what originally was there, was a 150.
And that's specific in the wastewater.
And that's the wastewater, yes.
To help keep
Correct.
that fund whole and not end up landing it across, because in a lot of those
Well,
budgets...
wastewater, wastewater is not hurting in cash at all. And I know we have lots of expenses that come out of there. The utilities is outrageous, and we have that. But we have been saving a lot of money in wastewater for years. I mean, we started that, a long time. So there is a lot of money saved in wastewater.
Like how much money?
A little over $2 million.
How about in the water fund?
Not. Because of the TIFs, money has been borrowed from the water fund, and so the water fund is in the red.
Can you clarify how we borrowed money for the TIFs? Do we use it to loan out for the financing we did, or did we pay for infrastructure?
We paid for infrastructure.
I think
That's what
first
the
answer too,
internal,
though, Kevin.
that is the internal.
I think the first answer too, the money loaned out basically through the TIF.
So we're using the money out of that enterprise fund as the means that we're collecting the interest we're getting. I mean, so we've got that fund loaned out.
Yeah, most loans were 60-40, 60 water, 40 for general fund.
Thank you for the clarification. I mean, it might be quite a stretch to get 212, but those are the important things to keep our
I
community
mean,
going.
I could see, like I said, the 150, if you could come up with the 150 and where you wanted it out, I would understand, that could be done. But the 212, yeah, I have no idea if there's any of the department heads here that would like to split it up.
Well, I'm just kind of going through, I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor. I'm kind of going through the packet here, looking at travel and training. And I mean, $60,000-$70,000 across the board. What if we were to ask each department to cut that in half?
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, I don't know who that, I'm not sure who that, probably the one that would affect the most would be no, because and you're saying across the board, every fund, or are you just saying general fund?
No, across the board, travel and training.
Okay, so that one would hurt mostly ambulance.
Yes. But I think if we're at, and then I also looked at the Camaro rally, and this year it brought in $38,600, and yet the expenses added up to $18,100. So could it be where?
And the thing that the cutting, I mean, if you cut any place else other than the general fund, then I'm going to have to start doing those transfers. So it would be a transfer out of 213 into general fund. So anything, if you get away from the general fund and cutting there, then you got to remember that I'm doing transfers. I'm back to doing transfers because you got to transfer out of one pot into the other pot.
They could cut the citywide leadership training. That's $10,000 in my budget. The citywide leadership training that was asked for this year, that is duplicated next year. You could cut that. That's $10,000.
So if you want to start, and we can go as, what your ideas are, where we're at, where you want to do it, and then whoever's fund it's out of, if they're not here, then I guess that's too bad. They don't get to fight.
Perfect.
Well, it looks like, Mr. Forster, we're kind of looking at the 150 then, right? The equipment replacement. Are you looking at that 62? Is that something that you wanted to add in to move that back down to, I think, what's 150 then?
Well, it's a hard sell for me to take the money out and then leverage a rate increase out of the fund that we just took out. And in addition, per discussion we've had, we've got an additional surcharge that's coming. And so I'd like to preserve the equipment fund so that we don't, once again, burden future councils for
understood.
Additional expenses, and continue to try and keep our utility rates low and affordable, because as a total package, it's a struggle for some of our residents.
Is that 62,000? Is that being spread into additional taxes, or is that going back to the? Go ahead.
If we went and looked at the bottom line, $62,000 actually did not come out of wastewater because there was money, there was 24, let me find my sheet. So if you looked at the bottom line, because of the changes we made in the HRA, some of them were being taken out of wastewater also, so we did them adjustments, and so there was like $24,000 worth of adjustments that was made. Here we go, or $27,368. So actually, what we took out of wastewater, because we gave that money back to wastewater, $27,368 through the HRA and the wages that had been taken out. So we adjusted that. because the engineer, there was wages being taken out of wastewater. I think fleet maybe out of wastewater, I'm not positive. So anyway, actually what was really taken out of wastewater was 34,632. So it wasn't the total 62, because we gave money back when we did those other not corrections, but reductions, because we took money out of the wages, we took money out of that HRA, that reduced that.
So when that came out of the enterprise fund, that came from what there was cash on hand. That did that equate to additional taxes or additional fees in that enterprise fund for this year for the citizens? Or again, did that come out of the cash on hand?
I'm not quite sure what you're saying.
I'm just, because if I heard right, we took 34,000 out of that particular enterprise.
Correct.
And that 34,000 then was, my assumption was that was what was on cash, that's part of the cash on hand in that
yes.
account.
Yep.
That
Yep.
34,000
Correct.
now is not necessarily being
Right.
subjected to an additional fee in that enterprise fund to
It's
the
cash on
citizens.
hand, just
So it's
like I
cash on
told you,
hand.
there's $2 million there.
Roger. Okay. Roger's, sorry about that. You're not Roger.
Yes, correct.
I know you're talking big numbers, and I understand that, but there are little things that add up and get bigger. And as I look through here, I see things like, and I don't know if I can find it because I got my fingers. Okay, under buildings, there's a $400 allowance for uniforms, and there's one employee. What would that be for? And then in engineering, there's a $3,000 for training and travel. And I've been in the professional world. If I sell my professional skills, it's my obligation to keep up my professional skills. Why would we be paying $3,000 to educate an engineer who should already know what they're doing?
To answer your questions, Bonnie, the first one, we have a couple reasons that they provided uniforms. One, they get a uniform allowance per their collective bargaining agreement. We also are obligated to buy them like logoed uniform items so that when they're out in the public, they have a consistent look to our employees and they're not just wearing whatever t-shirt they found in their closet. Your second question, a lot of professions have continuing education requirements within wastewater and public works as well as engineers, and they're required to have those educational opportunities in order to keep their certifications.
Teachers have to do that too, but the school system doesn't pay for it.
I can't speak to the school system.
I mean, I'm just looking at the world in general and saying it looks to me like there are some things here. I mean, can we not buy them patches that they put on the shirt? Do we have to buy the whole shirt? They'd have to have a shirt anyway to get to work. You know, they're sure not coming naked. It just seems to me that there are a multitude of little things that we're doing unnecessarily and that people in other venues don't get covered. And so I think we have to look at, when you talk about tightening, we've got a generalized allowance for seminars. You know, when my university budget was short, I didn't get to do any conferences for that year, or 2 or 3. And I think when you say tightening purse strings, yeah, sometimes it pinches. Sometimes you don't get to do the fun things. Sometimes you don't get reimbursed for your meals when you go to a meeting you were going to eat anyway. I'd just like you to think about some of those things.
I'd like to chat a little more about the overtime piece. For example, I see that the city manager has $1,250 of overtime in it. Administration has $4,500. I mean, those are salary.
No, the admin was taken out. That was taken out a long time ago.
Are we sure?
Yeah, we're sure. It was taken
I
out
took that off of
2
the-
times ago.
There's no overtime, no, you're correct. Well, when we have $375,000 in overtime, we need to protect our police and, ambulance, public works activities to make sure our systems work. But I'm wondering where all the rest of the overtime comes. Is there any way that we can get that summarized into the overtime for police, streets, water, sanitation, and ambulance? Did I miss one? And that way we can compare it against the rest, because on one level, I mean, that seems like that's one of the places that we can try and pull back at least a little bit of this.
So we do, just so you're aware, as part of our collective bargaining agreement, some of that overtime, like particularly to wastewater, water, if we do a call out, they get an automatic 2 hours overtime, whether it takes them 10 minutes or if they go over the 2 hours, then they get paid regular, straight overtime, but they do get a minimum of 2 hours on any call out. So just so you're aware of that.
Well, that's reasonable, because how do you get somebody out of bed for 10 minutes in the middle of the night if it's to turn a valve or something?
My overtime is mostly rally. This year it has not been, because Adam has been coming to the council meetings and doing the council meetings, and so that he is still as a wage. He is not a salaried person as of now, and so that is why mine is over, is that we have him here and he's learning and he's been training and going to different things with me, so he has some extra overtime. So that's why I'm over. But mainly most of it is during the rally. I also let my people go to it's called the District 10 meeting. You all know about that. I usually let them go to one thing that all of us go to as a team, because we learn about new laws. And so there's just little things like that. I might let them have an hour here, an hour there.
And I'll speak on the police department. As you know, we're a 24/7 operation. We've been struggling for full staff for over 10 years now. We try to do our best with maintaining a minimum staffing. For officer safety, we have a minimum of 2 officers. We won't go any less, but we're in the same boat as Rick, so I have mandatory overtime with any arrest. As you guys are aware, we have to go to court every other week, so 9 times out of 10, unfortunately, those are our night shift officers, and so we got the 2 hours. There may be 5 minutes of court, but it's 2 hours. On the training side, last couple of years, I'm like Faye. I try to take my command staff to a leadership training in Sioux Falls. It's a conference every year, and last year, and probably the way this year's looking out, due to trying to maintain our budgets, we have cut down on that. So we are proactively doing the best that we can when it comes to travel, training, and we try to minimize the overtime as much as possible, due to the fact, we've had some unforeseen bills come up with a wrecked car or purchase of firearms that came in sooner than later. So we try to stay proactive as much as possible, but at the end of the day, we still have expenses that come out, unfortunately. And same with the training, to echo off of Bonnie, we are mandated to have 40 hours of training every 2 years. Some of that training's mandated every year. We have to have a minimum 1 qualification of a year for firearms. It's kind of tough to do a department training. We're actually trying to get it done this year, figuring out how we're going to squeeze it in with the manpower issues, but you can't, unfortunately, do that without overtime somehow, whether it's covering shifts or whether it's getting the officers out there to train. But we try to get the best bang for our buck that we can. And unfortunately, we are mandated by the state to send officers to training, and we're through the bargaining, we make sure to pay them. And same with the meals, if their meals aren't provided, we do feed them. So,
Jody, how would we end up with $4,000 of overtime in the animal shelter?
So there as well, we had a time when one of our employees went to the VA, and so we had one staff that's working 7 days a week. We had a couple part-timers, but unfortunately, part-timers have real jobs. And so Autumn had to sacrifice a lot of her personal time working 7 days a week, long hours, and dealing with the animals. That's the reason we had that step up. We finally got one hired, but due to the rally, she was an employee from the liquor store. We didn't want to cut the liquor store short, so we waited till after the rally. But yeah, there was I think about a 3-month period, and we ended up bringing a part-timer in as much as possible, but there was still, unfortunately, overtime. And that's the other thing too, is we work 4 10-hour shifts with two animal control officers there. They have animals where, as you can see, if you look at our stats weekly, we are full more times than not providing animal services, and those animals need cleaned. The kennels need cleaned, and they also need fed. So what we'll do is, even on holidays, we have to have coverage, so they come in and get their cleaning done as quick as possible, try to get it within that 2-hour time frame and go home, and then they try to rotate that as well. So the overtime's shared, and as well as the responsibility, and we can allow some time off for the personnel as well.
Chief, from your reports, I think it's fair to state that about a quarter of those animals are actually from the city.
Yes.
When we do read the weekly reports,
we've been in conversations with Sheriff West, trying to get some finances from them as well, because we get a large portion of animals coming from the county. We are also, as you know, we have a contract with Somerset. They don't have a lot. They hold some of their animals, try to find the owners, and once they can't, then they bring them to us, and we take care of them and bill them out accordingly.
All right, thank you, Jody. I guess part of the struggle is listening. I mean, Faye, you said it was because Adam's your overtime is high because of Adam attending meetings, but that's 23. You're retiring next year, but we have a a substantial amount of overtime that's still in the 24 budget.
Said the majority of that is the 10 days. Well, it's starting. I started on Tuesday before the rally. We work 9-hour days, and then anything that comes up that we have to stay after, we do Tuesday through that Saturday. The last Saturday is what my overtime is, and of course, overtime has gone up as wages go up. So does overtime.
So to circle back to get to a spot, because we need to get to a spot that we can possibly make a motion. Can the finance office on the fly confirm that it looks like there's an error in the $144,500 for the supplementary overtime?
That would be Lisa.
And then could we split out those mandatory 24/7 operations in our overtime budget so we can look at dollars for our mandatory side and our more discretionary side, for lack of a better term?
Okay, so tell me the 24 hours would be police,
Ambulance,
ambulance,
water, sanitation, streets. I would imagine, Rick, does that include parks?
When we cover on the weekends, those guys take a day off during the week, so we try and minimize our overtime.
I can't imagine the things they have to deal with in the summer when yeah. I think I heard a story of a toilet's full of rocks here just recently. Put the light bulb in there, yeah, that was the story, yeah.
So police, ambulance, water, wastewater, streets, sanitation. Yes. So if you give me a few minutes, I'll go to a calculator and then just pick out, just make a total. Is that what you're wanting me to do? Then to, I guess, what do you want me to do once we take those out? Get a total for you?
Come back just with totals for us to talk about.
Okay.
In the meantime, could we talk about a point of order on this? Help me remember, Mr. Mayor. how many votes tonight will it take to pass first reading?
Thanks.
Is it unanimous or is it a
It'd be,
supermajority?
it'd be a supermajority of the sitting body, so even though,
votes.
6 votes because of the 2/3 of the 9, even though Angela's gone tonight.
So Counselor Forrester, I've gone through the budget and looked at all the supplemental retirement plan numbers. Unless I missed one, I total them up to be about $107,425. Plus, in that line item is also the buyout for the finance officer's retirement. So I come up with $138,425. So I'm just off a little bit. So I might have missed a department, but that appears to be pretty close to the estimate I'd given.
So doing the basic that we got 100 employees using the $1,000 piece, the additional buyout and
Gets you 130.
finance.
So it's 107,000 roughly when you're looking at like the budget. And I think the difference with that is ambulance. We have budgeted employees that are over there. In my kind of rough head, I use 100 employees full time because that ambulance number does shift. So that's just kind of my average full time number benefited. So it's very close. And then I think the reason you're closer to 144 though is because you've added in the finance officer's buyout, which was in that line as well.
I certainly added that. I took every amount that was in that supplemental retirement budget.
Yep. And the reason that's in there is that goes to the special pay plan, that payment. So it'll actually come out of that line item as well.
That will go straight to South Dakota retirement.
It does, yep. And so just to kind of not add another line, we just included it there and it just changed the wording.
Thank you. That didn't help, though.
I was going to say, you're hoping to find the money.
Adam went to do it. Adam's young.
Right.
I was just going to share something that we learned up at the county. We advertise forever for an engineer. They're almost extinct. The state of South Dakota will tell you the same thing too. They are continuing to advertise for engineers. Apparently, most everybody who graduates from our great school down there in Rapid City leaves the state. And we finally gave up. And luckily, we were able to hire Spearfish's former planner, who is going to do that. So perhaps you will have more luck in finding somebody there in January than we did. The other thing I was going to tell you, the past commission bought motor grader, or did not buy motor graders, they leased motor graders. And all the leases came up a couple of years ago. Kevin might remember exactly when, because he attended all the meetings. And we found out we could buy used ones for more than what the companies wanted for us to pay for an additional buyout. I mean, it is not very financially feasible to lease those motor graders at all. We ended up buying motor graders, and we're going to have 2 motor graders going on the auction block in the next couple of months. And so if you guys are looking for a motor grader, maybe we'll be able to help you out. Huh? Well, because we bought 2 more. And as soon as the rest of them get delivered, and we sold the other motor graders through an auction house. And we don't have to go there. Nothing. It costs us nothing but to handle the sale. But there are different provisions when one governmental entity is going to sell to another governmental entity. We could possibly, I think there's a way that if you wanted a good motor grader, we might be able to help you out.
Well, did Rick hear that? No, I'm just kidding.
You guys, if you're talking about like wages, remember you can do another 20%, because once you take those wages away, then all the FICA and all that, all that. So if you're looking at some of it, then think about once you take that, lower that number, then the FICA and all that lowers.
So what I'm kind of whispering about is keeping 100,000 in the equipment replacement, and then finding the other 50 out of, the travel and training across the board from departments, but taking the majority out of the engineer and the city manager.
For the travel part?
Well, travel would be like 12,000, 15, 10, 12,000 across the board cuts from the departments, but then taking more out of the city engineer and the city manager position.
Reducing them.
Reducing them.
But you're still saying, instead of transferring the 150 from the equipment replacement, just 100.
Just
No, just 50,000.
Just 50.
Gotcha, okay,
And then
that's where I was
cutting,
confused.
finding the 50 in the travel, 50, splitting it between travel, city manager wage and city engineer wage. That way Faye isn't having to do all of, the transfers.
Well, I would like, and I don't know how much more we would want to cut on city manager and engineer, but would it get us down 40,000? Because Lisa's already volunteered 10.
Okay, so it'd be,
So it'd be 40,000, so I don't. Correct.
That 62 is just for the position that Caleb was in. I didn't include the other one.
are we waiting for Adam?
Yeah, we're waiting for
To see what the overtime is.
But I mean, I'm just trying to, it may be too simple, I don't know, but that's just kind of,
Lisa, can you do some adjustments on those two and see how much money, can you do, just see the difference?
It sounds like we take more risk with the engineer position than we can with the city manager position. So maybe a higher percent out of that one. Kind of what Doreen was saying, it's probably tough to fill that position. And right now we, our solution has been working with the, sourcing it out.
Simply discussing, we're struggling a little bit for cash just because of how bills are falling and whatnot. If I remember correctly, back in May, we signed up for a line of credit from First Interstate Bank.
Correct.
Do we anticipate needing that in '24, and where does the interest on that then actually land?
Yeah, we've used about, I've already taken out this, and of course, part of that money is coming back through the 7th Street Bridge. So the FEMA money, you can, if everything is good and sitting good, you'll want to pay off that loan. But I think there is only about 56 $100,000 more that I can draw on that. It might be a little more than that. I just did a draw for the finals on the 7th Street, but it's probably probably about 2.5, I think I've borrowed, and we've got 500,000 left.
So 7th Street project, this isn't the agenda topic at hand, but wasn't that like 700,000?
We should get, I think, Rick, right around $1 million. We should get right around $1 million back.
So how are we landing then with 2.5 on a line of credit?
Because there was other ones that we paid for. We paid some of, now you're throwing me here. There was other projects that was in that.
There were, I think, 3 listed. Total.
Part of it was the wastewater. We had to pay $300 and some thousand, the last payment of the wastewater. And it's not still the last payment, but the final payment would be only like $50,000. So that was paid out of there. There was some stuff on Dolan Creek that was paid out of there. So it's just other projects.
Is that because of our current cash position?
Correct.
So do we expect that we're going to have to, on some level, make sure that our departments know that until we get, it'll be May before we get our 24 tax collections.
Well, we'll have another tax collection this year.
Well, I understand, but for the 24 budget, we are going to be pretty cash poor for sure for the first few months of 24.
Well, if FEMA doesn't come in and that, like I said, we've got other cash streams coming in. It's just a matter of waiting for them. We've got money out there that's on the AWAS that we just need to apply for and bring that back in. It's not a whole bunch right now, but they're getting close to getting that project done. So that would be another $300,000 that we would be getting back from the aeronautics.
So where do we land the interest for that then?
Interest for the loan?
The loan, yeah.
Right now we're paying $7,000, I believe, quarterly. That's what we've only made one interest payment on it, and that was $7,000. Capital improvements, and that's where the payment will come out of.
So I read both groups.
No, this budget.
I just pulled it from Cassell. I thought he wanted totals used.
No. No, just what was in the budget. So should we try to go the other direction with the what do you got? Or I can go do.
At this point, that seems like the simplest course of action for at least the first reading, and we still have more discussion, obviously, coming up on this. Let's see if that's feasible to try and. That's going to take some research, some looking stuff up. I think that's the most feasible. Now, I do understand and I completely agree that, yeah, we should probably look at our overtime, but can we guarantee cutting overtime alone will get us anywhere close to what we need? At the moment, I don't know. And that's going to take some research, so I can't expect all research to be done right now.
I'll crack at it for very quickly. Give me 5 minutes.
What's the 100,000 in outside brand marketing?
Wastewater 14.
Do you guys want me to answer that? So we have the new logo, the new brand, and this year we've did it, and we want to do it next year. We are trying to get that brand out there so that it is familiar everywhere. And so when we say outside, we mean outside of pretty much South Dakota, outside even Nebraska, that further out. And so we are trying to make that brand worth more money. Because our sponsorships, as that gets more popular, the sponsors are going to want it. And when they want something, they pay for it. And so we are out there marketing ourselves, and that's why I know, Doreen, you said market bad, but what we're trying to do is strictly work on our logo, our brand, and we want everybody in this world, not just the United States, to know this logo.
No, I did not say marketing was bad.
Well, that it's.
Made my income in marketing, but sometimes
There's a saturation.
there's a saturation.
Right.
And so far, this year, that marketing, that 100,000 that you had in the budget only produced $4,200. So I'm saying that wasn't a very good return on investment.
Well, and I think we could look at that and maybe say, okay, let's take 15, 25 out of that. And then you could leave the travel and training alone.
If you want to do that, take 50,000 out of that.
Yeah,
I mean,
I was thinking 50, take
we could,
that,
yeah.
cut that right in half, we might be,
That might get us,
we may not get the marketing we desired, but we're closer to not overspending.
So a hasty math, it looks like 321,000 is for all our primary overtimes, leaving approximately 50,000. If we made a 20% cut in that, that's an extra $10,000. So
Real
I
quick,
hope
to
we would-
answer your question on city manager, I would not recommend cutting that more than the 15 we've already cut. Sorry.
but the rally marketing,
If we pull the 50 out, then we're at 60,000. So now we need 40,000 because we're trying to eliminate the 100,000 from being transferred, correct?
We could still cut some of the travel. I mean, obviously, not for PD, probably not for engineering,
right.
but,
And Kevin, you think 10,000 is what we can get out of travel?
Very, yeah.
Oh, that's overtime?
Overtime.
Oh,
so
not travel, overtime.
I split off
I think you said 12,000 over training and overtime, or training and
police, ambulance, public works, streets, water,
Yeah, leave those alone.
leave those alone.
Yeah, so that would be on OT.
They came up to
10,
everything but
$10,000.
50,000, or, you know, so if we take 20% of that,
Okay, so now we're at 50, 60, 70,000, so 30,000 more.
how much can we take out of the city engineer salary? Right now, it's at 62,787. Lisa, I heard you say, what, 33%? So maybe like 21,000 or out of that one?
And of course, then you can plug it for another 20%, so that would be what, about 4,400?
could we get Deb to maybe summarize what we're kind of talking about? Could you happen to put it on something so we can look at it on the, sorry to put you on the spot,
Let's see if it matches our notes here.
I'm good with the
Let's
97.
just say 4,000, because that'll make it.
That's 25 out of the city engineer,
70.
50 out of marketing, 10 out of IT.
I think we're off about $5,000 to get to 100,000. I think we're off about 5,000. Because I have about 25,000 for engineering. That would include the taxes and that type of stuff. And then 10,000 for overtime, 50,000 out of marketing, and 10,000 out of HR. So I think we're right around about off 5,000.
so,
10,000 HR, 50,000 for the,
Outside marketing.
thank you. Couldn't read my writing. 10,000 out of OT. Oh. 10,000 overtime, and do what, 10% or whatever? I guess, do you want me to base that on what their budget is, or how do you want me to go about that?
Are you talking about the training and travel, or are you
No,
talking
the
about
overtime.
I'd say if budgeted, if it's 20% of, obviously not our essential personnel, but 20% of that extra, cut that, should be close to 10,000 roughly, according to Matt. I mean, obviously these
Hasty
figures.
math, I hope we can check that over
Yeah.
the next 2 weeks, or
Yeah.
the next week.
Yep.
And then we have.
And 25,000 for engineer, and that would include the wage and the taxes.
And how much out of training and travel?
We have not done that, so training and traveling would be maybe the 5,000, split it up or something. I don't, anybody willing to give some up?
That's 100,000.
Okay.
And the overtime, was that, Kevin, a percentage of the, what did you call it?
Was it 10 or 20%?
20%.
Okay.
Other?
Overtime,
Yeah, of other overtime, non-essential.
non-essential, yeah.
Personnel.
How much of that percentage, or how much of that 50,000 of overtime from somebody that's more, I guess, familiar with where that comes from is able to be cut, or how much of that is somebody filling a position that we don't have right now?
I'd say a lot of the stuff outside of the essentials is, us filling in, during the rally, helping out. So that'll limit a little bit of what we do and how available we are, but we can make it work. I mean, that's you guys' wish. Well,
Because a lot of them are nuts. I was just kind of looking through, and I mean, it's anywhere from 3,000 to 6,000. You know what I mean? It seems like that's where 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 is the different OTs. Yeah, is the ones that we will be cutting, the 20%. I think Parks was a little higher than that. I think Parks was at 14 or something like that. So.
they get all the call-ins. so they
Right,
need it.
right. And was Parks on the, they weren't on the list, okay.
So that leaves,
Reasonable.
so you're saying not transfer out of, cash on hand or something? General fund.
Mr. Mayor,
Go ahead.
I would like to move to approve for first reading the 2024 city budget with the proposed cuts as listed on the screen. Thank you, Deb. Yes.
Correct.
I'm sorry, yes.
So we have first by Becca, and I just want to make sure we have clarity here. With this $100,000 in proposed cuts, that still leaves the $50,000 for the transfer out of equipment replacement into the general fund. So we still have with the current,
To balance, we need that 50,000.
so that's exactly what I'm getting at. There'd still be a $50,000 transfer from the enterprise equipment and replacement fund to the general fund
Correct,
instead of 150.
correct.
Okay,
And we would still have the transfer of 62,000.
Correct.
Out of,
wastewater.
Correct, which I, like I said, it's more like 34 if you look at what had happened with the wages and the HRA. It wasn't the full 62,000. if you went and looked at bottom line. And I can show you that next week if you want me to, or I can send it to you Monday, or if yeah.
Wastewater enterprise, yep. So I have a first on the floor.
I'll second.
I have a second by Preston. Any last discussion?
Could we possibly just restate the whole motion, including the amounts, because the video, the Pete recordings and whatnot will not have what's on our screen here.
Do you want me to do that, Becky?
Go.
Just the. So the proposed cuts will be $10,000 out of HR, and that was for leadership training. $50,000 out of rally and events for outside marketing. $10,000 overtime, 20% of each department, that not including the essential departments. $25,000 out of engineer, and that will be just the wages and the taxes on those wages. And $5,000 out of training and traveling. And do you want me to split that up like a 10% or something like that? Something like that. Just get and try to be as fair as possible.
So to restate the motion, we had a first with those changes as Faye stated, changing from the packet, the original enterprise fund from equipment replacement transfer to general fund being reduced from $150,000 to $50,000 along with these changes. Any last discussion? Public or council?
I'd like to go on the record. I don't believe that we have much for a contingency after we make those kind of cuts. Should we have a situation, and we can have situations, I think our budget's too thin.
Any other discussion? None being heard. That being said, and it's an ordinance, we'll go ahead and roll call. Mike, we'll start with you, sir.
No.
Tony.
Yes.
Kevin.
Yes.
I am yes. Becca.
Yes.
Dean.
Yes.
Aaron.
Yes.
And Preston.
Yes.
First reading passes with the changes as the motion stated. Item 5 is other matters that come before the council, non-agenda items. No talking budget. Until next meeting.
Mayor, and I've heard two different dates, so can we, for the second reading, is it going to be the 27th or the 28th?
Wednesday the 27th.
When it's a Wednesday and a Thursday.
I believe we landed on the 27th is what?
27th at
consensus states.
6:30.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Next Wednesday.
Thank you.
Any other matters? Council or public? Item 6 is executive session. There is a request and there is action slated for the agenda afterwards. Is there a motion for exec? Got a first by Tony,
Second.
second by Aaron. All those in favor of the motion, please indicate by stating yes.
Yes.
Opposed to no. We're in exec. It's 8:52. We'll go in here shortly. We back live? We're back live and return to open session. Item 8's approval of the claims.
Mr. Mayor, so moved.
We got a first by Dean for the remainder of the claims that were left over from Monday. Is that a fair statement for the MasterCards? Is that what you
Yes, sir.
intend? We got a first by Dean,
Second.
second by Aaron. Any discussion, council or public?
Just to note that those are just the MasterCard bills that we will have late fees on if we don't pay.
Correct.
They're the highlighted ones on the
Correct.
on the claims report.
And those do have other highlighting, so just the MasterCard.
Just the MasterCard ones.
Excuse me.
Any last discussion? None being heard. First and second on the floor. All in favor of the motion, please indicate by stating yes.
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 Opposed to no. Please note unanimous for the roll call. Brings us to, too many pieces of paper here. Item 9. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Got a first by Tony,
Second.
second by Aaron. All those in favor of the motion, please indicate by stating yes.
Yes.
Opposed to no. We're adjourned. 9:25.
You'd think the council would have had something on announcements and days. Recognize my birthday.